unmuted.
City Council back in session. Roll call, please.
Carlton.
Here.
Vieira. Maniscalco. Here. Hurtak. Here. Gould. Miranda. Here. Cedro.
Here.
Bill Fiscal.
Thank you. Agenda item number 7. File number E 2022-8, Chapter 27.
Good afternoon, Council. Eric Cotton, Development Coordination. Can we get the presentation up from where we left off? Awesome. So this is, I think, the moment we've all been waiting for, which is accessory dwelling units and the proposed changes to the code. Let's see. So accessory dwelling units, just for some quick background, they're allowed in the city in 2 locations. One, Lowry Park Central, which was a privately initiated text amendment, 2003-2004 timeframe, and of course in Seminole Heights, which was adopted by council when the city adopted its SH districts. What we don't have in the code is a definition of what an accessory dwelling unit is. The language that's proposed, that you can see up there, is a dwelling unit that serves as an accessory use or principal use. That is mimicking the state language that's in Florida statutes. So I don't know if we want to have any questions as we go from slide to slide. How would council like to handle that?
Any comments or any questions?
This is like 6 sections, so let's
Yeah, there's a lot of sections in here. Do you want to go through all of them, or as you have questions, we'll pause?
I'd like to, and if we have questions along the way, or toward the end of each section, we'll have
Okay.
questions asked.
So, one of the appeals that city council hears on a regular basis is when someone applies for either an accessory dwelling unit in Seminole Heights or an extended family residence elsewhere in the city, they're putting it into a detached structure in the backyard that's, instead of being at the required 3 feet, 3 feet is at 2.5 feet. Administratively, staff denies that request. They appeal to council, and council, hears the arguments, and probably 95% of the time has waived that required setback and granted a relief to that section of chapter 27, 132. So the language that's up here is for language for both extended family residences and for accessory dwelling units is very similar. For an accessory dwelling unit, it cannot be located in a non-conforming accessory structure or structure made conforming as a result of a variance. Extended family resident mimics the same exact language. What this is proposing is allowing staff to approve those instances where the structure is non-conforming. So instead of having to come to council for a petition for review and adding on another 45, 60 days worth of time, this would eliminate that. It would not, what happens now for those of you who came from the Variance Review Board, Chair Citro and, Councilwoman Hurtek, when a variance is granted, that structure now has standing, so to speak, to stay there. So if they were to remodel in the future, knock it down, they could go back to that 2-foot setback. With this language, if it's approved, they knock down that structure, it catches on fire, whatever, they have to build it back to the required setbacks of the zoning district that it's in. So that would meet that requirement.
Any comments, any questions?
Yes.
Councilman Miranda?
We're on number 7, right, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yes,
All
sir.
right, as I read it, an accessory dwelling is when a single-family dwelling with a separate entrance or conforming necessary. Is this for a family member we're talking about?
Extended family or for the family members when they go through that special use.
All right, I believe in what I call it the racetrack, trust but verify. So how do we know they're a family member? Do they have to, in other words, when you come into this country, you have to fill out a bunch of forms, you have to be processed and so forth and so on, and you put a family member to check all that out. Do we really check them out or we take their word?
They submit, when they sign an affidavit, and normally people submit either like their wedding license saying they're married, or they submit their birth certificate that shows who their mom was or father, whichever way it happens to be.
All right, so you have that.
We
like
do-
an
we do submit-
accessory
they are
deal that
required to
you
submit
check it
evidence.
out. I'm not opposed to it. What's happening here in this city is this. There's houses that are bought. There's houses that have been there for 30 years and have had an accessory dwelling without residency of a dwelling of a member. And those, when you look at let me use an example like I did today. Let's say my house where I live at, it's $800 a year taxes because I live as homesteaded. But a house like mine that's not homesteaded, it's about $3,000 a year. Because why? It's no longer a single-family use and not homesteaded. It's been there 20, 30 years. They've been collecting rent, and I can verify everything I'm saying to you. And it's not when I say you, sir, I'm not you directly, it's just you as a symbol. So they pay nothing to the federal government in income because it's still under their name. The water bill's under their water bill, the electric bill's under them, but they're collecting rent. Believe me when I tell you, there was 232 of these found in a small section of where I live. So notice I'm not mentioning names of where I live. That was only a small section, so there could be 1,000 of them where I live. Now, the school board was looking for money. So and I looked at my bill just last night, and I say, I'm gonna round it off to $2,000 so I can equate the system. 1,000 of that 2,000 and ad valorem taxes goes to the school board. The other 500 to the county, 500 to the city, or thereabouts, within a few dollars apart. You know how much revenue is being left on the table? Millions. Just because. I'm not blaming this administration. Let me say that. I'm not blaming this administration. This has been going on for various administrations. So now I'm supposed to take this and swallow the pill in my same neighborhood. In one block, there's 3 of them. One very close to where I live. Got at least 3 to 4 apartments. And what do they do it? When you see an opening of a gate, that the outside is where you put the key in, and you got a problem. It doesn't take a kid from Ybor City to understand that. In fact, 10, 15 years ago, guess what? In my own house where I lived, I got cited. And I said, how can I be renting when you can't get in the back or the front? The lock's on the inside, not on the outside. And I showed it to him, nothing there. So somebody must have said he's doing this because they didn't like what I was doing. It's got to be stopped. The taxpayers are subsidizing those individuals. They're not paying their fair share of ad valorem tax, and they're paying no income tax on the earnings. And they're supposed to be new Americans. They're my kind, my nationality, and I don't like it. So do you know of anything we're going to do about that? Or are we going to do this without doing that?
Well, what you're describing, it would not be legal. This would not address those issues at all. Those are code enforcement issues, and code enforcement, I mean, you're aware they did a sweep of West Tampa probably about 10 years ago. And they cited a number of residents that were like that. The ones that are illegal get cited. The ones that are not illegal would not be cited. This wouldn't address that anyway. This is for extended family residences, which is still an SU1, even in the code today would still remain that.
Is this going to be citywide or just in certain areas of the city?
This language the language that was on the screen is citywide.
Citywide, so they can be in any part of the city.
Correct, for extended family residences, they still remain special uses.
I have no
Yeah.
problem with that. What I do have a problem with, in case we're going to segregate it in certain parts of the city. Because then, we're not applying the law equally. We're writing it the way we want, so that only certain parts of the city receive that, the other part does not. I'm fine.
And that'll come, the accessory dwelling units where they're allowed is further in this presentation.
Any other questions at this time? Councilwoman Hurtak.
I was gonna save this comment for later, but since it's been brought up about extended family residences, I find this topic, the difference between accessory dwelling units and extended family residences, very confusing. And I really think that we should just do away with extended family residences and find a way to just put it all together. I'm just gonna say that right now, and I would really love to have a discussion on that at some point, because this is confusing. He's right. We simply do not have enough code enforcement officers to check on these things. And yes, I realize that might have some tax implications for some people. Again, this is why we need to discuss it, but it is too much of a burden on the city. I technically have an extended family residence in 7 years. No one's ever come to investigate. They've sent letters and we've set up times and then they keep canceling. So it's, you're supposed to be checked once a year, and it has just never happened for us. So it's one of those things that if it's not happening for me, it's probably not happening for other people, and then other people are, taking advantage of that system. And so I see exactly what Councilmember Miranda is saying, and so I think that when we're redoing this is the perfect time to look at taking these away and figuring out just one method.
Councilman Goods.
We talked this morning about the process. I'm just trying to figure what is our process. I mean, someone goes and apply, or give me the history, because my thing is if you're applying, we should have a registry or a tally so we can be able to go trust and verify. So what is our process?
So currently in the code for both an extended family residence and an accessory dwelling unit, they're both special use ones, which is the administrative process requires notice, and there's specific standards that an applicant has to meet. For the EF, for the extended family, one of those was, it has to be a relative, can't be separately metered, those kinds of issues. But they're both special uses, require notice. They submit a site plan, review the site plan. They provide evidence of who's supposed to be living there. If they meet the criteria that's set forth in the code, we can approve it. If they can't meet the criteria, we would deny it, and then they file the petition for review, come before city council.
All right, so that's this question here. Regardless if it was a family member, it's a dwelling, it's a back dwelling. So even if you didn't have a family member living there, shouldn't that still be registered, or could we implement that regardless of a family member? That way we're collecting the taxes on that?
Well, my understanding from the property appraiser's office is extended family residences, because they're not income generated, are not taxed. There's no additional tax on them. Accessory dwelling units, which is what we're gonna be discussing later on in this presentation, are taxed. The property appraiser does assign a value to them, they do tax those.
If I may, I'm not trying to.
Councilman Miranda.
I'm not trying to take over the hearing, anything like that, but any building other than your family building, if you put a shed in the back, guess what? You pay extra for the shed.
Correct.
So now we're saying that because we have and I can show you where people have enclosed their carport and charging $600 or $700 on the side of a carport is no bigger than from here to Mr.
Right.
Square. It's, let's say 16 by 10, and they're getting $600 a month. There's a toilet, a little bed, and a TV set. And you cook on a little Coleman gas stove or whatever.
Hot plate.
That's right, hot plate and all that. So they charge you
Yes,
for
sir.
that. And here, I'm not trying to stay away from what you got, but how in the world can somebody have somebody that's real property now and not be taxed?
Those units like that are illegal. What happens when, and I'll be honest with you, when people come in and they get cited by code enforcement, they go through a process called a formal decision of the zoning administrator, where they try to present evidence that that use was legally established, either prior to zoning, or, a lot of times they were established 3 years ago. Formal decisions denied. Code enforcement then continues with that process of code enforcement to try to make them remove the second unit. When people come in and they talk to me and they say, we're going to approve that, I'll say, just so you know, that if it's finding in your favor, the property appraiser will, on occasion, go back and try to collect back taxes on people. If the units were illegally established or legally established, they have the ability to go back and actually say, hey, you owe us for the past 6 years, you've collected this much, you've had this second unit that was income generating, you owe us money. If they are successful at that, I don't know, because that's not us, that's the property appraiser's office.
If I can just add, Abby Feely, the discussion today, I see where it's going in relation to the taxes and that, but we're not the taxing authority, the property appraiser is. And what we're here on today, I just want to pull it back to that for a second, is that you've had several appeals come to you over the past couple of years related to non-conforming structures that have a 2-foot setback instead of a 3 for a detached unit that's already existing on a property, and they want to put either an extended family residence in there or an accessory dwelling unit in there. And the change we had proposed was that the code currently doesn't allow it because it's non-conforming. When they come to you on appeal, you're granting it and saying, okay, we're gonna let that use go in there, and that makes that structure then conforming, because you're granting that. This says we'll allow them to go into those non-conforming structures the way they are now, and it leaves those structures as non-conforming. So I know this is a multifaceted discussion, we wanna talk about all those different elements, but I wanna kinda keep this on track as far as what is then enforceable from the taxing authority or from code enforcement versus what we're trying to do with the code here today.
Councilman Miranda.
No one said that we're the taxing unit, but however, we're the ones that are letting it happen. We're the ones that, for one reason or another, code enforcement maybe works on Saturdays or Sundays, I don't really know. I know they do go out if they're called. We don't have the proper tools to let them do their job fully. They can cite somebody, and I don't know what happened. In fact, the other day I was driving around, and I remember 3 of them on one street, and I'm gonna give you the addresses of them, because all of a sudden we had it on the agenda 3 or 4 years ago, and then when I was driving around, it disappeared, and I never heard what happened. It was supposed to come to council. It was set for another date, and never came back.
If you'd give those to us, we'd be
I
happy to
certainly will, and I'll
get
do it
back with you
tomorrow.
on that.
But I just want clarity that, it's gotta stop. There's over 1,000 units that I can point out to you. I know 232 for sure in a small area. You multiply that by 10 times the area, I make an assumption there's gotta be 1,000. There's not one block where I live that doesn't have at least one or two of them. And nobody does anything. Let it
Understood.
happen, let it be happy, nobody pays a tax. Meantime, they're criticizing the government.
Understood.
Thank you.
I just don't want us to
I-
block progress on looking at this in the zoning light versus the enforcement light, and the enforcement needs to be handled separately.
But if we pass the zoning, it clears up everything, we don't have to have enforcement.
That's not, no, unfortunately, it does not. So it doesn't make things that are illegal legal just because we do this. So I want to be clear on that. Enforcement is still the key to bringing that issue into compliance.
But my problem is that, not my problem, our problem is that I never see the end of it where something is resolved. That's it.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
To bring it back to this, so what you're saying here is that if someone has an old garage and they want to transform it into an ADU, they will be allowed to do it, but if that garage burns down, they'll have to rebuild it to
At
the new
3 and
setbacks.
3.
Okay,
Yes.
that's fine, because as long as we can use the structures that are habitable, or that could possibly be used. I know there are a lot of historic garages in some parts of the community that we actually, on the variance review board, saw several of those. So I wouldn't want that to be stopped, but, okay. Thank you, that answers my question.
Yeah, because the challenge today is when they appeal it and you grant it in the 2 and 2 or whatever that setback is, 0,
That's what they get.
that's what they get if it burns down.
Yeah.
They get to go back to 0. And our goal with nonconformities in the city is to eventually have those things become conforming. So we don't want to continue to proliferate them. We want to identify them, use them, and then when they've lived their lives, have things conform to the code.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Then if I may, Ms. Feely, are we just talking setback conformities? Or are we talking height? Are we talking permeable spaces, since they're all non-conforming to those also? If you have an accessory structure in your backyard, and it meets the setbacks, but it's 15 foot is the height for an accessory structure. If it's 25 feet, are we conforming that also?
That would be correct.
The way you are doing it
If someone's backyard
today,
is totally
yes.
paved, and someone built this accessory structure, there's no more permeable space. Are we conforming that also?
No, because the permeable has a resolution. When you go over 50%, you have to retain ½ inch on your property.
the
So you have to
conformity-
put in a pipe system and other things. So that's not a non-conforming characteristic that you would be allowing at that point. They would still have to comply with that element. It's the dimensional regulations.
Thank you. The conformity will be the setbacks, the height, and the size, the square foot size.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hurtak.
But to follow that, yes, 15 feet, but what if it's a garage apartment?
But again,
That's still.
It's still a
right,
non-conformity.
it could still be a non-conformity. It's the bulk, the height, setbacks, that's
Yeah,
what we're
but the-
discussing.
That, so 15 feet is enough for a height of a garage and a garage apartment?
Are
No,
you
no.
talking about an existing structure?
Yeah, so, no, so yes, say you have an existing structure that's 2 feet and it burns down and you have an apartment and a garage under it, and then you want to rebuild it because it burnt down, you would, in essence, not be able to do that because you would only have 15 feet height.
Or you meet principal structure setbacks. In order to go above 15 feet in height, you meet principal structure setbacks, but I don't want to get caught
Okay,
up in the
okay.
new ADU construction. I want to try to handle these, it's a very multifaceted discussion, but I do want to try to handle these one step at a time. So the first was, hey, let's get a different definition for this in our code. The second was allowing them in non-conforming structures, which currently they're not allowed. They come to you on appeal, and council is granting them because it is appropriate to try to use that housing stock, so, or that building stock. So that was number 2.
Any other comments or questions?
We're-
Councilman Carlson.
A lot of people online and other places have been asking about Airbnbs. I know we're preempted by state law, does this allow people to have two places for Airbnb, or is it all one?
I don't know that us allowing this in non-conforming structures is going to be impacting how Airbnb, if you have 2 units on your property today in Hyde Park and you're allowed to Airbnb both of them, you'd be allowed to Airbnb. We're preempted by the state and the regulation of the Airbnb.
But if people are building new ones, then that would provide 2 units for Airbnbs then on their property.
Theoretically, yes.
Just like if you're building 2 townhomes and they're not for sale. I mean, it's 2 units. It's not because it's an ADU and a principal unit. I mean, it's 2 units. If it's 100 condos, it's 100 condos. I mean, yes.
Whichever way you want to look at it, you can thank Tallahassee for that. Councilman Vieira.
Thank you, sir, appreciate that. Quick question, I know this was mentioned before, for this, ADUs, et cetera, places with deed restrictions, et cetera, CDDs, whatnot, obviously, this would be inapplicable, I would assume.
Correct.
That's what I thought, because much of New Tampa, for example, this wouldn't be applicable for. I mean, I think that's open and obvious, but just to say it. Yeah, and something that Councilman Carlson mentioned with the Airbnb, that's you know, a concern for a lot of folks, and it's something that we really, you know, if we do go forward with something on ADUs, which I support, I think it's something that is smart, especially right now with our housing crisis, but we obviously have to measure and keep tab of any unintended consequences and whatnot, and we have to, you know, just keep abreast of that.
Councilman Goode.
The only thing I'm leery about is, you know, Mr. Vera brought it up, good point, you know, certain communities have CDDs and deed restricted areas, and I'm just concerned that putting these all over the city, especially in some other already blighted communities, will bring on more blight. I'm kind of nervous about the construction and building of these, I mean, permitting and things. I'm just concerned. I just.
Let's.
That's actually the
We
next
haven't
slide.
gotten there yet.
Okay, all right.
We haven't gotten there yet.
All
We're
right.
still at, these are existing non-conforming structures that are on the ground today, and could they be allowed to use those for either EFR, extended family residence, or accessory dwelling units? We're still on what we have in the city today. We haven't gotten any of the new stuff yet. We'll promise you, when we get there, we'll let you know. We're not there yet. So that's where we are on this item. These are all existing, either detached, they are detached accessory structures that either don't comply with a setback or a height regulation that would now be allowed to be used for this.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
Just so, just a thought, maybe we should approve these as we go. Because the first one, approving the definition, I think we're all okay with that at this point. I think we're all okay with this at this point, just so we don't get confused down the road, because obviously we are having a lot of conversations as we go. How does everybody feel about that? So I move the first 2.
Thank you.
A motion made by, do we want to take them separately? Council?
So the action summary just comes up clean, if we can. Madam Clerk, are you okay with that?
Can you go back and I can say what the other one is? I don't have the actual other.
They're in, I had a table
Yeah,
in
but I
the
mean,
front
just,
of the.
but if you go, we still have it on our screen.
Okay,
so
definition,
Okay.
adding a definition of accessory dwelling unit to the code, 2743 is the first one.
Okay, yeah, so 2743, and then if you hop to the next one, 27132. I move both of those.
Chairman, on the question on the motion,
Oh, public comment before you. make-
I can vote on one part, but I'm not gonna vote on the other
Well,
part.
let's take them separately.
Okay,
Please.
well then, definition,
Read that number again, 27.
32, I believe?
43.
43, sorry,
Do we have any public comment?
on the definition. Sorry.
Seeing none. We have no one online? Thank you. We have a motion made by Councilwoman Hurtak, seconded.
Can we define it? One is family, for family use, and the other one is not.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I think we're
it's your
getting there
motion.
later.
Okay,
This is just,
number 7?
yes, I'm gonna make
Part
that
of
motion
number
later.
7.
I don't think that's part of what we're doing here, but I'm happy to make that motion later about taking out extended family, or at least discussing it. But this is just the language of non-conforming to conforming, right?
The second portion of that, correct. This is strictly the structure
We're still
itself,
on the
not,
first
not
part.
the use.
We're still
Or
on
the
the
definition.
first part.
Oh, we're still on the definition, okay,
Just on the definition.
okay.
Motion made by Councilwoman Hurtak, seconded by Councilman Vieira. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed?
Okay, my second motion is to move section 27-132. Yes.
Accessory dwelling units, just be the top one.
Oh, I'm sorry, accessory dwelling units, extended family residences in non-conforming structures.
We have a motion made by Councilwoman Hurtak, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to this?
I'll be speaking a few times, but I'll keep it brief. I just want to summarize why this is important. A path to compliance for illegal ADUs is something I think everyone agrees we should have. If we didn't have that and we just said we were going to tear down every single illegal ADU in the city, that would be destroying thousands of affordable homes. And finally, I'm on the fence on this. This really depends on the extent to which you believe that homeowners would provide affordable housing. But I will say the smaller unit, the family one, is, you know, not paying taxes on it and it being smaller, make that the most affordable type of housing that we have in the city. So that's all I'll say about that.
We don't have anyone, do not have anyone online? Thank you. Any further comments?
Again, may I just say that I can't vote for this because it's the accessory dwellings and it's non-conforming and it's for both extended family and accessory dwelling for anyone. And they're not gonna let them have it for free, they're gonna charge, and they're not paying anybody anything, and they're just living off the fat of the land.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
Just to respond to comment, I agree that those are cheap. However, my concern is habitability. So just because something is affordable doesn't mean it should be that it is habitable. And I think what we are all trying to do is move from housing that is not legal right now. And I believe all of us have it in our goals to do whatever it takes to make that habitable, to bring people into compliance, because we want people to definitely be living in somewhere that's safe but also affordable. And I don't think we have to decide. I don't think we have to decide one or the other. I think we can have both.
Any other comments? I just have to make this comment, and I'm going to vote yes for this, but we need to talk about this much further. It goes further than what Councilman Miranda is saying. If someone walks into an accessory dwelling and says, I want to rent it, I'd like to sign a lease, the owner says, no, you don't need to worry about a lease, meaning that they're not going to report this, so they don't have to pay taxes on it. It's affordable now, but that rent could be increased at any time the person wants to. So I am going to vote yes, but we need to take a look at this further. We have a motion made by Councilwoman Hurtak, seconded by Councilman Vieira, Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposed?
Aye.
Did you get that?
I'd like to hear it.
You want to do roll call vote, please?
Goods,
No.
Vieira. Yes. Maniscalco. Yes. Miranda,
No.
Hurtak,
Yes.
Carlson. No. Citro,
Only with some investigating later on. Yes.
motion carried with Goods, Miranda, and Carlson voting no.
Mr. Cotton.
I can have the presentation back. Thank you. So next up is actually a change to accessory dwelling unit standards. So right now, as I said earlier, they're a special use in two sections of the city, Seminole Heights and the Lowry Park Central area. What this is proposing is to remove them from requiring the special use approval and allow them to be permitted elsewhere in the city. And let me go to the next slide real quick. Right now, the code would propose them to be allowed in the Central Tampa, West Shore, and University planning districts by right. So anybody who could apply through permitting and establish an ADU in any of those areas that are shown on the screen. So we created, proposing specific standards for those uses, or for that use. Right now, some of this is mimicking what's currently in Seminole Heights, which was previously approved by council, which is maximum size is 950 square feet. The accessory dwelling unit can only be on a piece of property that's owner occupied in the front. To the main house would have to be owner occupied. You can design it either within a single family home, so it's I'll use Happy Days where like the attic was on top where Fonzie would rent out from the Cunninghams, or in a separate accessory structure like a detached dwelling unit or whatever. No more than 2 people in the accessory structure at any given time, and you could separately meter the structure itself.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I have a problem with B, only because A, they're everywhere. I can give you a huge list right now where the front and back are being rented in my neighborhood. And it's not a huge problem, but I'm also, what I've heard from landlords in the past week, knowing this is coming up, is saying, hey, we actually have the capital to put these in, and we would do it with our existing rental housing. So I would really like to look at that further. But the other one for me is D. I thought that had changed to 2 unrelated occupants. But I was thinking like a small family.
They would not be unrelated. So you
Yeah,
have a family
okay, I'm
of 3
sorry.
living in such a thing. Yes.
Yes, this, no, okay, I got it. So never mind. So my concern is B, because this is what I'm hearing from constituents, that our landlords are saying they would like to use this to increase the housing stock.
Well, the basis for that requirement, that's currently what's in the code now for Seminole Heights. Some of the basis for those of, I think Councilman Miranda was on council maybe back when the zoning for Sulphur Springs went into effect and the zoning went from single family to R2. And part of that, and I was talking to Susan Swift, who was here this morning because she was with the city when that took place, was the logic on those was you'd have a duplex, owner-occupied rental, and what ended up happening was both ended up being rental units, and there was no ownership to the neighborhood. And that's where staff is coming from based on that experience. And with the current language in the code to require one to be owner occupied before you could rent out the back. That's the basis of that requirement.
Yes, but I think it hamstrings people. I mean, in our neighborhood, we have, one of my neighbors owns, 12 different rental properties at least in the neighborhood. And her houses are impeccably maintained. I mean, she has high standards for her tenants, but we have incredibly deep lots in Seminole Heights. She would love to build accessory dwelling units to provide more housing, but if she doesn't have the opportunity to do that, I mean, that's 12 more units. So I hesitate, maybe on smaller lots, but.
Well, it's the decision of council on how you want to direct this. This is staff's recommendation, but if council doesn't want that requirement, I mean, that's the purview of city council on that.
If I can for just a second, Abby Feely, so these criteria came out of the preliminary discussion we had with you all in June. And we developed these 5 after comparing notes, working with Stephen, and coming together and writing this code to say, okay, here's where we're gonna start. So that's what's before you today. Here's where we're starting. If you don't want A, B, C, and D, and you just want them to be what, I mean, it's at the purview of council. These are staff's recommendations to you, and as a board, you can tell us the direction you'd like us to take.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Is there, Councilman Vieira?
Thank you, sir. And again, confirming, I mean, and I'm supportive of this. I think that by and large, I mean, obviously there could be unintended consequences, but generally supportive. But again, confirming deed restricted neighborhoods, 33647, et cetera, wouldn't be affected by this, correct?
Correct.
That's
Right.
again, just because I'm OCD. Another thing that I would recommend is that maybe, because again, unintended consequences of this is that maybe we motion, maybe Councilwoman Hurtak, who brought this up, and again, very supportive, maybe to look at this returning back to us in 9 months, a year, whatever it may be, just to see how it's going and what any unintended consequences are through however we may pull the numbers together. So just something that I would suggest maybe be done if you'd be amenable to that. Oh, that a motion to maybe have this come back to us maybe in a year, whatever, to see how this is going,
Oh,
any
absolutely.
unintended
Yes,
consequences.
yes.
Because again, I'm supportive,
Right.
just
That-
everything has gray in it, right?
Well, and I think that's a wonderful idea, because we have to look at how this expands, but the reality is, these aren't cheap to build.
Sure.
So you're not gonna have people who, these aren't going to end up being, places where we have to worry about the upkeep going. That's probably further down in the future, several years in, but absolutely to keep bringing this up. But what we're hearing now, and loud and clear from residents, is we don't have enough places for people to live, and literally anything else we can do to encourage people to build these would be what I would support. But I would absolutely support coming back in a year or so with more, you know, maybe a code enforcement look or something like that.
Thank you, Madam, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I salute you for the Happy Days comment. That was awesome. Well done. I mean,
Thank you. I aged
Great.
myself, but, well,
it's a
I mean,
great
what can I
show.
say?
Thank you.
Until you jump the shark. Councilman Miranda?
On this one here, I look at it, and there's something that I'm going to single out here. An accessory dwelling may be designated to be designed to be located within a single-family dwelling with a separate entrance, and that's happening all over now. If we pass this, all those that have been doing this for years, collecting and not paying, I don't want to be an accessory to a crime. And then that C and E contradict each other. An accessory dwelling may be separately metered for utilities. They're not, and I'll tell you why they're not. Because they get a house, they divide it, they change the walls, they add restrooms, they put minor kitchens in them, and guess what? Now you got 3 and 4 units in a house, and you're collecting. And what happens, the key to this, the first thing they do, they fence it off with a plastic fence. The next thing they do, so one of the utilities you can't follow, is they put solar. So your electric bill is less. But they can't put 4 meters in the house. They only have 1 meter. And that's the only way you can verify, by checking the average flow of water within that block. So there's a lot of things, C and E contradict each other. Within a single-family dwelling with a separate entrance or an accessory structures. I can show you houses now where they got 4 doors on the outside. They've marked apartment A, B, C, and D.
And most likely, none of those are probably legal units. So,
None of them are legal, but once we pass this, they become legal to some degree.
no, this is only allowing for one accessory unit on the piece of property. And I understand where you're coming from, Councilman.
This is only one dwelling in the property, not dwellings on the outside. This is one dwelling that's been cut up inside, and they made it to whatever they want.
Right, but under zoning, that would be, but your describing is for dwelling units, not one anymore. What this is basically allowing is, as Councilwoman Hurtak was saying, the people who have a single-family home in front, they would be able, and they build an accessory dwelling unit, they could have that separately metered. and not have to jump the meter from, the electric from the main house back to the accessory dwelling unit. So that could have its own meter, receive its own bill from TECO. City water would have its own water and sanitary sewer meter. That's what the logic, but that's what the impetus behind the language is basically going to allow. We're not, nothing in this is attempting to make what you're describing legal.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I'm gonna make we don't really quite have a motion for this yet. I mean, I sort of did, but I think the bigger discussion that we all need to have in another meeting is how, I'm gonna make a motion for staff to bring back a plan for bringing non-compliant structures? Non-conforming?
No,
No, that's not, illegal, thank you,
yes.
let's just, yeah. So for bringing illegal, accessory dwellings, ADUs, family, I guess we'll use both language at this point, accessory dwellings and extended family residences, or just
How about just illegal residential units?
okay, that works, thank you. See, that's, and, so a motion for staff to bring back a plan for bringing illegal residential units into compliance. Like, one of the things I was thinking about is maybe a year of amnesty. I know East Tampa CRA is talking about a rental, assistance program for, making rental structures habitable, like going to the landlords and saying, hey, you know, we'll help you pay for this and we'll put a lien on the property and you have to guarantee you're going to keep it affordable for such and what. I mean, I've talked to staff about this before, so maybe a program like that. Like, because he's right, we all have to figure out how do we encourage and motivate people to bring back, to get into compliance for habitability and for just so we know how many we have.
So if I can just ask, and that motion, that would be code enforcement and land development to come back with that plan.
Okay.
And I think the first thing on that would be understanding, before we know if it's amnesty or what the solution is, we need to understand, you know, how we're gonna address first the problem and what is going on and what that really looks like in terms of quantity or number of these throughout the city. So, that's fine, just that we're not the enforcement arm. I mean, so we want to make sure that we're working with our partners on that to get you the best answer possible.
Okay, so maybe March workshop, is that enough time?
Yeah.
April workshop, what?
We have one in February and when's the next one after that?
Yeah, we have one in February that's getting pretty full. I mean, I'm going to ask for some time to work with Keith O'Connor and that team to understand what their current procedures are when they're dealing with that, how that looks, you know, understand how many we might have under citation right now or with liens or,
Yeah.
so, April would be fine.
April, okay, perfect. And that would be April, looks like April 27th.
Great.
We have a motion made by Councilwoman Hurtak, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Thank you.
There still needs to be, on the issue that we were just talking about, the accessory dwelling unit standards. Was that motion was for land development to work with code enforcement, but what about this case right here? You want to take action on this today, or?
Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak to this part of agenda item number 7?
I think that I think we're all a little bit confused with the process right now. This needs to carry on to be something that's voted on next month. That's my point of view on this. I'm not sure what happens if you don't make a motion, whether it just doesn't come back next month. So I would really appreciate a motion to make sure it comes back next month. Specifically, I want to point out why this item is important. You know, we're looking for changes that are going to actually create a useful amount of affordable housing for the city of Tampa. I've heard a city like ours can expect, if we implement a really good policy, to have 300 per year. If we could do 300 accessory dwelling units per year, that would be an incredible achievement. This is not going to create 10,000, it's going to create 300. If we are making rules and being really picky about it so that we actually result in 50 being built, then this whole day would have been a waste of all of our time. 50 homes is not going to move the needle. So specifically when we look at B, the one that Councilwoman Hurtak was talking about with the primary residence, I think that's the most impactful change that we can make to what's being proposed here that will take us from 50 to 150 or 300, take us to the next level in terms of how many things these things actually get produced. I would really hate for us to go through all this and at the end of it, do that meeting a year from now, like Vera mentioned, and we find out there's been 50 applications because it just, why would you do it with all these rules we have in place? So first we need to have this new rule passed, but I would love to see a change that says that homeowners who can afford to build these will actually build them.
Anyone else within chambers that would like to speak to this? Ms. Pointer, you're online?
Okay. Hey, good afternoon. I don't think it makes two flips of a difference whether the landlord lives on the property or not. If they're going to be a good landlord, they're going to be a good landlord whether they live there or whether they live down the street or across the country. Really doesn't make any difference. Oh crap, I lost my train of thought. But bottom line is that it just doesn't make any difference. I just don't want to see these in the CHHA. Sorry, not sorry. And 300 of them, that is not even going to touch the 3,000 that we still have coming south of Gandy, west of Dale Mabry. They're already coming. Thank you.
Ms. Bennett, you are online? Ms. Bennett.
Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Caroline Bennett. I wanted to speak on the last item and I wasn't given the opportunity to do so. My concern is that I don't feel like the public has really had a chance to understand what's going on and ask questions. Public information meeting, I could only stay on for an hour and a half. I don't know how much longer it went on. I believe Ms. Feely said it went to 4 hours. So a lot of people didn't get to hear what was going on and ask questions. I would like to see a public information meeting that's dedicated to nothing but ADUs. I look at this and I don't know, what is the setback? Is it 3 feet? What's the height? There's just a lot of questions and that people don't understand what this is going to actually result in. I have questions about the land use limit. If you're going to double the number of units on a parcel, how does that affect the land use? What if it goes over what the land use allows for that area? I don't know how that works. I also, when you talk about the person owner occupied, I happen to really agree with that, and I'll tell you why. Because most of these ADUs are going to become Airbnbs. Virginia Park, which you can't even have ADUs. We've got 20 of them on the Airbnb website. And the ones that we do not have a problem with, the ones that neighbors don't complain about and no one's concerned about, are the ones where the owner lives in the principal dwelling, because they're right there. And if things get loud, if things get out of hand, if there's bad behavior, they're right on top of it because it's keeping their children awake too. I have questions about, what about rooftop? Are they allowed to have a rooftop party area? What about the 950 square feet? Does that include that? Does it include an enclosed patio? There are some that have enclosed patios. I just think, I'm not against ADUs. I need to make that clear. But I don't understand the changes that are being made. And if I don't understand it, that means a lot of people don't understand. And I would just like to have more opportunity for the public to ask questions and to get answers. And I would love to see in print a written list of questions and answers that came out of the last public information meeting and any future public information meetings. Because a lot of people, they just want to understand what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
And just very quickly, as I read this here, and what the last speaker spoke about, the main residence is going to be owner occupied. It may be the first month or so, it may not be. And then you look at C, the accessory dwelling is to be located within this family, single-family dwelling with an entrance on the structure on the outside, I guess. And then you look at D, at no time may the number of unrelated occupants of an accessory dwelling exceed 2. We can't even find who rents an Airbnb for 5 days or less instead of 5 days and more. And you're telling me we're gonna find
My
this?
condo.
Huh? You're telling the public we're gonna find this? Let's be realistic. I mean, and then you go to E, an accessory dwelling may, not shall, be separately metered for utilities. I don't understand it. You're getting, like say, you know, it used to be in a bank, you wore a hat and dark glasses and a scarf, they'll arrest you. Now, if you don't have that on, they don't let you in. So what are we doing? I mean, I don't understand it. We're scaring an iron dog off the porch.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, Carolyn Bennett described exactly how I feel about these items. I came in here prepared to support this because in concept I support ADUs. But even the information I read or saw suggested that South Tampa or parts of South Tampa would be excluded and that there would be very tight details. But anyway, I don't see it like in here.
We're not, pardon me, Abby Feely, we're not there yet, that's the
Yeah,
next.
I think it's, like Nathan said, it's the confusion about the way this whole thing is being presented. Not criticizing you all, but the context of it, if it's like there are 2 items here, and I don't know how many sub-decisions we have to make here. Anyway, I think that the whole thing is confusing, and I'm sure the public is confused. I'm going to vote against all of these just because it's confusing the way it's being presented. And then if somebody wants to vote to have them come back as another workshop or something, I'm happy to support that. And then maybe I would support them the next time. But right now, as it stands, with the information we have, I just can't support the too many questions.
Councilman Goods.
You know, we want to provide a way for livable means. And we came up with the idea of the ADUs. We know Seminole Heights have had those for a long, long time, but that was a long time ago. And we have a housing crisis. So I know that we're trying to provide housing, some type of housing, and this could be an extra way to do it, but I don't think we got the whole boat in there just yet. There's some missing components. Like I said, you know, for me, if we're gonna do it, this should be for everybody. I hear South Tampa won't have to do it. You know, you'll have some communities, you know, you got a River Grove community, that's in the east side of town, they may not want ADUs in their community, even though it's not deed restricted. So I think we don't have a lot of conversation. I look at slum and life, especially on the east side of town, and so I don't know, I think with some of the structure we have, we probably could use some fixer-uppers and do some things, but then I look at gouging again. People start, you know, we talk about the building of these things. I don't think we have enough information yet. I just don't see enough information.
I guess then, Abby Feely, I'd like to know what information you'd like. This discussion started back in June. We brought best practices to you as to what other local governments had. We got direction from you as to what you would like ours to look like. This language here is written based off of that. These are our recommendations pursuant to how you directed us. If you don't like item B and you want that stricken, that's fine. If you wanted to say nothing in the CHHA, that's fine. But we came to you in June, we had that discussion. We came back in September and provided the draft language for everyone. We conducted a public information session. Ms. Bennett and Ms. Pointer and Ms. Zommerman have been emailing, I think 3 times while we were at lunch on some of these items. They know how to reach us. We're open to any suggestions or any recommendations or any compromises on any of these criteria. We were strictly taking the directive that was provided by you to to come back with ADUs that we needed additional housing options, and here we are. So that was almost 6 months ago when we started this. If we're not on target to where we need to be in this language, please tell me where you believe that is, instead of continuing to have circular discussions on to where we need to be. We're happy to go back and look again at other cities and bring that back, but I think we've got a really good start as to what we need. If it's just that we don't want it owner occupied, we can take out letter B. That doesn't have to be there. This is the code that we're working on together today through this workshop in order to enable this in the way we collectively want to see it happen to provide alternative housing solutions.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
We desperately need housing.
Thank you.
We desperately need housing. I understand that we have concerns, but literally in the next several slides, deal with setbacks, deal with height restrictions. I mean, all of this is already in this. This is just talking about the standards that are going to apply. We haven't even decided where we're going to put them yet. This is just standards. And this is incredibly frustrating. We're not deciding it right now. We will have a first reading. The public will have a chance to talk about each of these items then. But this has been discussed by us. This has had a public meeting. These are the things that they already have in Seminole Heights. If anyone wants to come, I will give you a tour of Seminole Heights and what they look like and how the community deals with them. I don't even notice them anymore. There's not a new construction in our neighborhood that does not already have one of these being built because it helps with the mortgage. It provides living situations for maybe a child or an elderly family member. But we've got to do something about housing. We cannot keep kicking the can.
Councilman Goods.
I'm good, sir.
Okay. Councilman Carlson. Brandy? No. Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that's my
okay.
alarm. Sorry. I think, I don't know what everybody's planning on doing right now, but I would like for you to go through the slides. Originally, we talked about maybe going through all of them and coming back. Are there slides you haven't shown yet, or?
Yes?
Yeah, so that's, I think if we saw all of it, maybe that would change the discussion.
No, I'm just going to make a motion.
Okay, and then I will finish my statement. Councilwoman Hurtak.
I'm just going to go ahead and make a motion to pass section 27-132 and section 27-282-.30 accessory dwelling unit specified uses by taking taking out section B. Let's just see where we are.
We have a motion made by Councilwoman Hurtak, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Any further discussion?
If I may.
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm glad to vote yes. I know that some folks are talking about potential imperfections in this. I don't really necessarily see any, but we can't let the imperfect be the enemy of the pretty damn good, especially with the housing crisis that we have right now. So I would urge a yes vote. My only question is, Councilman Carlson, did you want to see all the other slides before voting, or? I mean,
No, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, like I said, without the larger context, I'm just gonna vote against all of these. It's not because I'm against ADUs, I'm just, I can't vote for it with this process. But also, I would wanna keep in B on this also.
Mr. Shelby.
Yes, for the purposes of the public at home who don't see it on the screen, could you please tell the public what B that you're talking about taking out is?
Thank you.
And how it's referenced?
Thank you. B is an accessory dwelling unit may only be approved when the main residence is owner occupied. And again, the reasoning for that, like Mr. Miranda said, it may be for 1 month, but you can't really control it after that.
Councilman Miranda.
I understand the need for affordable housing. The city has an opportunity to buy land. There's some land right now for sale on MacDill and Cypress on both sides of the corner. They can tear down that and build some real 4, 5, 6-story high buildings and have all they want. There's also another 1.5 acres on North Armenia, the other side of Hillsborough Avenue, on the east side, on the west side facing east. You can put small units in there and do all you want. But when you go into a neighborhood, and anyone that's here wants me to give them an idea of what's happening, call me and I'll give you a tour of where I live. And if the media wants to come, and I'll show you 7 and 8 cars in one lot where there sits on the grass. I can see where you built the sidewalks and there's all kinds of vehicles on the sidewalks. I can show you things that are happening. And that's why I can't support this, because I know what's going to happen. Is this citywide? No. It leads certain parts of the city out. So I just can't do that. Thank you very much.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I just want to make a statement that I do appreciate that we are building multifamily on major corridors. But you know what? Just because you're a renter doesn't mean you should have to live on a major thoroughfare.
No.
I think that everyone, renters and people who are lucky enough to be homeowners, both of them should have the opportunity to live in a quieter neighborhood if that's what they so choose. And that's what this helps add. This is about equity to me. And equity, it's just really frustrating that we're saying that because you're a renter, you should really only be on corners of major thoroughfares. And this helps, in my opinion, helps make that more equitable for people to make to have options. As was stated earlier, we're going to become a community of more than half renters soon. And we really need to have an option. Just because you're a renter doesn't mean you don't have money. It doesn't mean you deserve less. I'm off my horse.
Any other comments?
One more. I agree that it's about 50% of the people that live in Tampa, not quite 50, but in the high 40s are renters, and there's nothing wrong with being a renter. I can also say some of the properties that I just spoke about, one is a beautiful lot. It is on Armenia Avenue, but it's way back. It goes back, I'd say, a couple of 100 feet, 250 feet or so. And I don't own the property. I don't know who owns the property. I just saw it as I was driving around the other day. But that's just my feeling on one. You cannot have this and be the way it is now and not attacking those that have taken advantage of the system.
Councilman Goose.
I'm going to support it today. I have some concerns because I believe this will bring on a lot of transient behavior in some communities. I know in some of the other communities that have it, a lot of them are owner occupied that are already there. They can control a lot of that. But I just feel that when you start putting some of these or allowing these in certain communities, it'll bring on more transient behavior. But I will support it today to move the process forward with housing. We have to try something, so I'll give it a try, and we'll, I guess, circle back up in a year, but I'll give it a try today.
Councilman Maniscalco.
And I understand the concerns of all the different board members here. We have a housing crisis. We have an impending, or we're in the recession. I don't know how bad this is going to get, if we're going to go to another repeat of what 2008 to 2012 and beyond was. Rents are rising. We did not pass any type of rent control, and for whatever legal reasons, I get it. I know we have state preemptions and stuff. We have offered direct assistance to renters, but that's temporary. We can't build housing fast enough, even though we have thousands of units that are permitted, approved, and in some stage, but we do something, and I'm going to support this, or we're going to have an influx of homeless people on the streets. There are a lot of people that I know that are struggling paycheck to paycheck, not even that. They're struggling just to make enough to pay the rent, and they're not doing anything extra because there is no extra. Again, with rising rents and the demand of people that are moving to Tampa, we have to do something that is meaningful. I understand that it's not perfect. I understand there's a lot of criticism on this. I understand a lot of things, but at the end of the day, we're going to have a bigger crisis if we don't do anything, and that's going to be with people on the streets. They're not going to move out of Tampa because they're not going to be able to move out of Tampa. They're going to be literally on the streets. They're going to be evicted. They're going to get their 3-day notices. Everything that happens. I'm hearing these stories, and so I'm going to support this, and we move forward, and then we start tweaking it.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I just want to amend my motion to move to have this come back December 15th. That way the public gets a little bit more knowledge or time.
Abby Feely, I was gonna talk about that for a moment, because this will go to the, dependent on action in the motion here today, this will go to the planning commission on Monday, November 7th. And then we do come back to you for a first reading on December 1st, where we will
okay.
have a whole hearing on the language. And then if there are changes in between first and second reading, just like you do with other things, you could make changes then again. So this isn't the end all be all before you today. This is, and we have time. And if the public or Ms. Bennett or Ms. Zommerman would like to meet with our team again before that, and before we come back on that December 1st, we are always available to have those discussions.
The only reason I mention that is because this is what we already have on December
Okay.
1st. So I just think that if we moved, we are
December
trying
1st
to
is
be
gonna be a
more
night meeting.
cognizant of what we put on our agendas. We're really trying.
It's an evening hearing on the 1st.
Oh, no, council, this is December 1st, our regular session.
Yeah, but Eric Cotton, Development Coordination, the actual adoption of language, because we're changing the use tables,
Oh,
but that
okay.
becomes a nighttime meeting.
Apologies.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, then I think December 1st is fine. Thank you, sorry about that.
Any other further discussion? When I first moved to are we saying that this is going to not be in South Tampa?
We have not discussed with you the areas yet.
Then
We're
let-
gonna
then
discuss
let
with
me
you
proceed.
next.
When I
We're
first
saying where
moved-
these would be allowed, these would be the criteria under which they would be
When
allowed.
I first moved to South Tampa back in the 80s, there was all the multi-million-dollar homes in South Tampa were all cut up into 5 or 6 dwellings.
Oh, the rooming houses.
And you had the worst slumlords in the world. But on each one of these multi-million-dollar now dwellings, you had a carriage house that had a unit upstairs. Fast forward 30 years, those multi-million-dollar dwellings are now just one unit, but those carriage houses are still being rented out as accessory dwellings. So,
Yeah, they are, because they're.
I'm just saying this, I would like to see E stricken, and I would like to see C stricken. We have a motion made by Councilwoman Hurtak, seconded by Councilman, not now,
Excuse me?
in the future.
In the future.
Yes,
So
in the
it's not
future.
part- it's not part of the
Not
motion.
now.
Understood.
In the future, between now and first reading, now and first, second reading.
No,
We'll discuss that later.
No, sir.
Okay, I would like to see that
I need to
stricken.
know now
I
what
would
we're
like to see
doing.
those stricken.
Well, is that a
I
motion
don't
then?
understand on C why B is, understand on C, this is saying how it may be designed to be either separate or within.
I just don't want to see a unit divided up, a single family unit.
It can only be, like, if you did it within an existing garage.
Oh, accessory garage, okay.
That-
I thought
that
you were
is what
talking about
that
the
is
main-
speaking
The
to.
main structure, my bad. Then I'd just like to take E stricken.
B.
E, he said.
But-
You don't
The
want them
motion
separately
is-
metered?
The motion is to have B stricken, that's the motion. You want to amend the motion to take something else out, sir?
To add E to it. Thank you.
And I won't take that motion, or I won't take that amendment, because mine is separately metered right now. And it says may, not shall. So you could have it metered, but you don't have to have it metered. And that is, I don't think that separately metered for utilities really makes a difference. Like, I'm curious why. What's your rationale?
Most times when code enforcement goes out to inspect, if they're allowed to get over the fence, and someone says, no, we only have 1 meter,
That means their unit's probably illegal.
Yeah.
So this would allow them to actually legally establish it with a second meter. That's what we're asking for in
then
this
it
case.
should have a separate meter.
It could have either, is what they're saying. If it's owner occupied and you're doing it accessory and you want to use the main house meter and you don't care, you don't want to charge somebody separate for your utilities, then you could use the same meter. If not, you might elect to have it separately
If you
metered.
have the same meter, but you have an accessory dwelling that's being rented out,
People
there
do
is,
that now.
there is no separation.
Yeah, but they just add to your fees. So
I understand that, but if code enforcement goes out and there's an accessory dwelling and somebody says, no one lives there. By having a separate meter, you're saying, yes, there is another person living there.
Not necessarily.
But again, if these are allowed as specified uses, there wouldn't be a need for code enforcement to go out and check to see if the unit's illegal. Because they would, assuming I have a single-family home, I have an accessory unit right now, I'm renting that out illegally. Theoretically, if this was approved, and I'm in the right locations we're gonna discuss momentarily, that second unit could become legal. So there would be no need for a citation to be issued on that outside of work without permits perhaps, because I may have converted over, without a permit or whatever, but the actual use would become legal and they would be a specified use. It could be a legal unit. So the second your concern with Mr. Chair wouldn't really affect it.
I will withdraw what I'm saying, but we're gonna run into problems down the line. We're gonna run into problems down the line. When code enforcement goes out and suspects somebody of having an accessory dwelling that they're either not paying taxes on or do not have any type of permitting for that, we may run into problems down the line. We have a motion made by Councilwoman Hurtak, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco, without my amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Roll call vote, please.
Vieira,
Yes.
Maniscalco,
Yes.
Miranda,
No.
Hurtak,
yes.
Carlson, Goulds,
Yes.
Citro.
Yes.
Motion carried with Miranda and Carlson voting no.
Councilman Carlson.
I think the whole conversation you all just had with Chair is an example of what I talked about a minute ago. This is so complicated and so confusing. Maybe Councilmember Hurtak completely understands it, but it's so complicated. We probably should have had a separate workshop just for this, and I wish we could have a separate workshop just for this. We're running out of time, and there's no way that we have this long of a conversation on one slide, and you have a bunch of other slides.
We have two left. We have two left. And before we go on to those two, if I might, during the public information meeting, there was some information shared about heights and setbacks for the accessory structures. And I think it caused a lot of confusion because we weren't talking about that at the beginning. So that was pulled. It is still going to meet accessory structure setbacks and accessory structure height. We are not there yet. We'd like to take these small steps with you today. So the last two items we have are the allowable areas and then the parking for the ADUs. Because these are all housed in different parts of the code, that's why we're taking them the way that we are. But we're gonna turn over to Stephen to talk to you about the allowable areas and then the parking, which was a discussion in June about if they're a certain size, no parking, if they're a certain size, one space. So that's where we are today. And again, this will all come back at that December 1st, where if we want to make tweaks or other modifications, we can. And we're happy to have other discussions if necessary.
Sometimes you just have to make a point. Sometimes you understand, but you just have to make a point.
Thank you. Stephen Benson,
Mr. Benson.
City Planning. On the screen, I'm showing you the areas of the city where accessory dwelling units are allowed, either through the general use table, which shows the RS50 and the RS60 lots over in the Laurie Park area where it's permitted. That was done through a privately initiated amendment some time ago. And then the Seminole Heights area here in purple. Again, the SH zoning districts, which is where ADUs are permitted now, and then down here, the NMU districts, which were created for the West River as part of that master plan process. Combined, all of these areas account for about 4% of the city. And then I think it's fair to say that from a planning standpoint, the selection of these areas relative to everywhere else around it is relatively arbitrary. So what we're trying to do is make the allowable areas more equitable and expand them to as many places as possible where it makes sense to do so. So in looking at the comp plan, sure, yes, sir.
If when I'm looking at your plan, anything in purple, there's it's allowed, right?
Yes, sir.
So from MLK, Martin Luther King Boulevard north, that would be all of Wellswood, am I correct?
No, so, and that's a good point. Let me kind of explain the areas. So this is anywhere that's in.
No, excuse me,
Yeah.
Wellswood would be on the west side of the river, not the east side.
Yes, so the Seminole Heights area, it's east of the river and south of the river, but north of Martin Luther King, east over to 15th Street, up 15th Street, and then east on Hillsborough Avenue, and then north on 22nd. So anywhere that's officially a Seminole Heights neighborhood, there's Southeast Seminole Heights, Old Seminole Heights, it's included in, it's already allowed in that district. That's what Councilwoman was referring to. So looking at where the areas that we've proposed, there have been several policy-related amendments to your comprehensive plan recently that dealt with where growth is encouraged in the comprehensive plan. Sir?
Can you push it up just a little bit?
Yes.
A little further.
It's really, I'm trying to keep the legend there, but
Right.
it's, the purple areas are again really the focus, but specifically the planning districts that are identified there in dark purple, and then the allowable zoning districts within them are what is shaded purple. Those are actually where they're going to be allowed. These districts were selected because the comprehensive plan speaks to the establishment of planning districts. There's South Tampa, West Shore, Central, University District, and then the New Tampa District, and then what the future is supposed to look like within those districts. It speaks to directing growth and new development and redevelopment into the West Shore District, the Central District, and the University District. It speaks to discouraging growth in the South Tampa District as being not suitable for as much growth as the Central 3 districts. And it speaks the same way about New Tampa, which is why New Tampa isn't included on this map at all. We're not proposing to touch either of those areas. So in addition to that, speaking to the New Tampa district specifically, we're not proposing to include that area as part of this because of the issue was brought up earlier. So making a change for New Tampa right now won't affect whether you're allowed to do it because there are other mechanisms in place that are preventing that. For South Tampa, again, falling back on the language that's in the comprehensive plan, speaking to where growth should be encouraged, South Tampa is not one of those areas. In addition to that, you can see we've put here on the map that a majority of South Tampa is included in the coastal high hazard area, and it does have a unique geography compared to the rest of the city, and there are implications with that. So this is where our recommendation was. It doesn't mean that we are recommending against including it in other areas. It just means as this next step goes forward, this is a good next step that staff was comfortable with putting before you today.
Councilman Maniscalco.
So this is not a citywide initiative, as you explained. It is restricted to those boundaries that are colored in that light purple, correct?
Yes, sir.
What's going to happen is, in my opinion, people in my district or in West Tampa, or people that are against this, are going to say, why is South Tampa excluded? Why are they better than we are? Whatever they say, they're not going to be happy. And they're going to say, they may say, why can't it be equally assessed across the city? And I understand your analysis and why you came to this conclusion and why your team came to this conclusion. But I know how it's, I mean, I can hear my father saying it. You know, why is it, it's not good enough for here, but it's good enough for there. And, you know, do it or don't do it at all. And so right there, I have paused with that because I know what I'm going to hear from other neighborhoods. And I understand why, whether it's a coastal high hazard, whether the density is already there in other parts of the city where we're not having to encourage this kind of growth. But the issue with rent is a citywide issue. It's not, South Tampa. Not all of South Tampa is rich. Not all of West Tampa is rich. You know, I mean, it's mixed and diverse. So I'm just saying what feedback I'm most likely going to hear because of this. Thank you.
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you very much. And you know what I'd say for the South Tampa and New Tampa areas that we explain, because there's a very rational basis for the exclusion. South Tampa, like you said, the high coastal hazard area, 33647 because of deed restrictions, et cetera, is that we very simply explain it. And I've actually done the reverse for parts of my district. I remember when I was running for office in 2016, and I supported the stormwater tax assessment, whatever, and a lot of folks in my district were saying, well, we don't get a lot of stormwater and whatnot, don't get a lot of flooding. Well, we're one city, right? And just the pipes program, a lot of folks said, hey, why are you doing this? Or in New Tampa, our pipes are new, they're newer, 30, 25, whatever years it may be. Well, again, we're one city, and there's a rational explanation for that. So I think for that, so long as we explain it, I don't think it's that difficult to explain, in my opinion. But trust me, I get it. It's funny you said about your father. I sometimes think my father would say that, so I often do that. But thank you.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you very much. So I guess if one of my two daughters or many of my other family members live in South Tampa, wanted to build something for me, I couldn't do it. Right? So I couldn't live in my daughter's house.
You would still be able to utilize the extended family residence use because that use is still permitted citywide. This is only changing the ADU use, which doesn't have the family member requirement to it.
That even gets a little more complicated, what you just said, because the public's not going to understand that one either. So you're telling me that if they want to build me an 8x10 room, I can do it, or they can do it?
Yes, in the South Tampa Planning
Then
District.
what's the difference?
The difference in the two uses?
And not putting into the law that they're omitted from that.
Well, that's because the EFRs are what currently exist. Those are the existing allowable areas. We didn't propose modifying those. So that's just sitting in the background.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I don't know if I made that motion to talk about getting rid of extended family dwellings, but I'm just gonna do that right now. I would love to come back and talk about that maybe in January, or we have April, I don't know, throw out a date. But I still think, because I agree, there is confusion, and I think we just need a clean slate. So I would love to make a motion to come back to discuss that at a future time. Not now, but at a future time. I can also work with you on that and come back later with a date. But talking about this, that my question is, I see a bit further south in central Tampa that looks like it's purple, but also coastal high hazard area. Like, explain, would they be allowed there?
Yeah, so just to be clear, the definitions for the planning districts are very specific. So the South Tampa Planning District does include some areas that people refer to as South Tampa. Just to be clear, that Davis Island would be included as an allowable area. Hyde Park would be included as an allowable area. That's because of how the planning district lines are drawn. It's not the entire, everything south of Kennedy necessarily that's part of the South Tampa Planning District. So that's why the map is very important. So that's it.
Just to expand on that, because it's the same question.
Yes.
Thinking about what just happened in Fort Myers, thinking about future land use, future use in coastal high hazard areas, that is an area where I would see where the public has made comments about not allowing certain growth in coastal high hazard areas. But I also know that depending upon the neighborhood you're in, they want more development. So what's the balance there? That's a $1 million question.
This was our attempt at trying to strike that balance.
Okay.
If you wish to add to this criteria in some way and say, in addition to these three districts, please also omit any parcel that's within the CHHA, we can add that to the language and make it even smaller. If that's the direction you're going in, I want to make sure I understand.
I'm just asking,
Yeah.
because I was trying to figure that out. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilman Goods.
It doesn't make a difference. I'll yield back, sir.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to this part of agenda number 7?
Nathan Hagan. Last year, the Planning Commission adopted an equity report, which included a phenomenal presentation about the history of racism and discrimination, and painted a picture about how we have deliberately concentrated poverty in East Tampa and parts of West Tampa over the last 80 years with our zoning code. It's very conspicuous to me. Well, I'll also add this. Last week, there was an article about ADUs and creative loafing that said that they were a force for gentrification. And that's a complex issue that I can't try to walk us through here in 3 minutes. But it's conspicuous, I think, Councilman Maniscalco alluded to this, is that if you're somebody who's in a community that has suffered from our inequitable zoning code for the last 80 years, that you're going to see that some neighborhoods get special treatment, again, as they have for 80 years. And so I understand the coastal hazard area. Even the deed restrictions, I don't even know. I don't have a policy solution to that. But I do know that saying that we can't have ADUs coincidentally in the wealthiest parts of Tampa for this reason, which, by the way, should be a safety building code issue, not a zoning code issue per se. To me, it's just, I think everyone can see through that. I mean, anybody who's on these issues in East Tampa and West Tampa will see if they're informed about this issue. That South Tampa, once again, is getting special treatment. So I think this should be citywide. I think there's an important question to be had about development in the coastal high hazard area, but that includes parts of downtown and Harbor Island and Davis Island and all these places that we got to figure out a big comprehensive plan. I know that we're doing that. I think that conversation can happen then, but when we're just talking about ADUs, we need to talk about the equity component, and that includes allowing these in those neighborhoods.
Councilman Goods.
You know, it's kind of like this red pen. It's just redlined on your map. You know, we could talk about the coastal high hazard areas, which we know we have some issues there. But when you say you're going to have a program for the city, it should be inclusive. You may have some deed restricted areas, but some of those areas that are deed restricted may be right outside of it that may not be. I just, again, it looks like to me, again, another classic way of redlining, but we're just doing it in a nicer way. But to me, it's just redlining. We talk about equality, but it's a part of equity as well, and we have to spread the wealth around. And you're right, Nathan. We're not spreading the wealth around. Thank you.
Justin Willits, 3203 North Bailey Street, Tampa Heights. I feel like we should just move ahead on this, and if South Tampa wants to come back and campaign for this, they should, then by all means. I think it makes a lot of sense based on what Stephen Benson said. We should be promoting growth in the places that make sense. South Tampa has demonstrated skepticism towards growth. There's some traffic issues there. We don't have enough transit. The coastal high hazard is a legitimate concern. It doesn't mean we shouldn't move forward in the rest of the city. And some other items that I want to just add in, you know, we don't have money for transportation or housing. We may not get it very soon. We can't expect the city to build enough transportation or housing. We need to lean on private property owners to build some more of this housing, and that's what we're talking about today. I bought my first house in Tampa Heights 7 years ago and thought that I'd probably already have ADU by right by now, and we're still talking about it. There are really a lot of benefits that this housing would provide, including affordability, aging in place, reducing displacement with soaring costs. The specific transportation-related impacts as a transit planner myself, a former HART employee, the problem with transit here is we don't have enough people near it. This is how we get more people near it. We have corridors lined with car shops, not dense housing. We can address that as well. There are 10, 20, 30, 50 things we should do as a community to get more housing. This is one piece. It's one of the easier pieces. Let's move it ahead and do the right thing. Like I said, come back later for South Tampa. I think he made it, the planner, the city planner made a good case for why it doesn't make a ton of sense. And based on what I've personally heard from the South of Gandy folks, I don't think they want any development, but this just is part of that thing. And I think I've nailed all my points here. I'm surprised that I'm not at 3 minutes, but I just think we just need to move this ahead. You have time to put more effort into this. The best transit service we have in this city and county is in the areas that we're talking about doing this on that map. You've got 15 and 20-minute service all day on Florida, Nebraska, Florabraska, 56th Street, and Hillsborough Avenue. Those are the 4 best routes in the whole HART system. They carry about 25% of the daily ridership, and this is going to put more housing opportunities along those transit routes. It's like, this is good for transit. Like, that's the big takeaway. Thanks.
Ms. Pointer, are you online? Ms. Pointer? Ms. Bennett, are you online?
Hello?
Ms. Pointer?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Pointer.
First of all, I want to address Mr. Hagan implying that there is no poverty south of Gandy, that we are bearing the brunt. In the 4 square miles that I live in, we've got 3,000 more apartments coming. That does not include single-family homes. That does not include condominiums. That does not include townhomes. That's only apartments. We have been working our butt off to stay that. Hurricane Phoenix had, and if you don't know what it is, you should Google it and you should watch the videos on it. Also, Ian, had it hit here, everything down here would have been underwater. So, you know, it's how many people do you want to drown? That's really what it's about. It's not about affordable housing in this particular situation. We have taken on the brunt of the housing down here, and they haven't even built what is needed for the 22,000 people who drive through our community every single day to get to work. So let's just make sure we've got it straight. I'm not against ADUs. If I didn't live on a dead end, I would be all on it. If I didn't live in a coastal high hazard area, I would totally be on it. I would think it was a great idea. I have a couple properties that are large enough to have ADUs. But the bottom line is, not every area of the city needs to have it because we are coastal high hazard. And all it took was Ian to hit a couple hours north, and you guys would have a totally different conversation today. And is that the conversation you want to have with your constituents 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when all those folks are stuck south of Gandy and they can't get out? We are a food desert, and you can't be a food desert without having people impoverished. All of our elementary schools south of Gandy are free and reduced lunch. Both of our middle schools for south of Gandy are free and reduced lunch. So maybe it's time for folks to do the math about what poverty means versus us being smart about what we're doing for our city. Thank you.
Ms. Bennett? Ms. Bennett?
Hi, this is Carol Ann Bennett. In the Tampa Comprehensive Plan, it says there are 6 levels of intensity to indicate where development should be focused. The lowest level, level 1, is South Tampa. Every department head in the city has come before you at one time or another and talked about where the growth needs to be. And a lot of it has to do with transit corridors. And every time they do, they exclude South Tampa and New Tampa. It's the 3 central planning districts where they think the growth should be concentrated. One of the reasons the comprehensive plan says that you shouldn't have the growth in South Tampa is because of the lack of transit services, and there's no plans to increase them. The flood-prone land, and Stephanie is correct. There's plenty of people in South Tampa who are not rich. A lot of our schools qualify for free and reduced lunches for all of them. And I'd also like to point out that South Tampa has done more than its fair share of adding to the dwelling units in this city. There's no coastal high hazard area in the city that has had more growth than the coastal high hazard area in South Tampa. We have a spreadsheet that shows the additional dwelling units, and we got this information from the property appraiser. South Tampa has added, when everything that's already approved is built, almost 9,300 additional dwelling units. So to say that we haven't done our fair share to add to the housing stock is completely inaccurate. And this is happening in an area where there should not be the growth. A lot of those units should have been in other areas that need them and where they're more appropriate. I am not against ADUs, and I apologize if I haven't done enough to understand all the complexities of it. support ADUs, but I need to understand them completely. And I'm going to reach out. I'm going to try to do that so that I'm not sitting here saying I don't understand what this means. But the bottom line is that these two areas need to be excluded for specific reasons. They're valid reasons. It is reckless and irresponsible to continue to increase the population in evacuation zones A and B and in the coastal high hazard area. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other further comments or questions from council? What is the pleasure of council? Councilman Maniscalco.
You know, Councilman Good said something. He held up the red pen and redlining, and you know, again, I'm always reading about history, and there's a lot of racism in that history. And when you talk about redlining, I mean, it's the gentrification, the whatever you want to call it, over the last century or half a century. I get it, but in this case, regarding how certain parts of the city flood, the coastal high hazard areas, where the growth is concentrated. Stephanie Pointer said it regarding south of Gandy, 3,000 apartment units. I mean, their density is coming in rapidly. And that's, again, not counting single family homes and everything else. But at the same time, I understand, you know, why the borders, and you mentioned in there Hyde Park and other parts of the city. It's not just East Tampa, West Tampa, but I'm going to support it moving forward. Can we further expand those boundaries in the future? I mean, will you look at that for further expansion? This is just phase one, essentially.
We would be happy to come back with a report and tell you how we're doing in a year. And
Okay, no,
propose some
I'm not
additional
making a
tweaks.
motion on that. I'm just
Sure.
gonna make a motion to advance this as presented and go.
Second.
Thank you.
We have a motion made by Councilman Good, seconded by Councilwoman Hurtak. Any further discussion? Councilman Good.
I think Councilman Maniscalco made the motion with Ms. Hurtak seconding it.
That's what I meant to
Okay,
say.
all right. Well, let me say this. A person who worked every inch of this city, from New Tampa to Port Tampa. And when you look at South Tampa, there is a divide. A lot of people don't know that. I worked at Robinson High School, and the ladies are right. There are some unachieving schools that are down that area. And there is a separation when you talk about South Tampa. Because when I was there, you had the borderline. You had the SOG, and you had the other side. And they didn't really too much mix and mingle too much. I think that's kind of changed a little bit now through the years. And I can remember when there were no apartments on that side, Manhattan, those areas down there. So they are right as far as the growth is concerned and the amount of apartments that have been built up there. That area has totally changed. Even in the back area, you have now houses back there. There wasn't anything back there before, back in the early 2000s. So I can concur with what they're saying in reference to that. And I can see how we're trying to say we want to look at the growth pattern. But to the bigger picture of everybody, they don't understand it. They just see what I just said before, a separation. And I don't like separations. I'm going to support it today, but like Mr. Maniscalco said, we just have to be mindful and keep our eye on the prize and make sure that the distribution is going everywhere. Even with the New Tampa folks up there too, there's some areas up there that they're undeveloped, they're probably developed, and we can't leave them out in the future. So I just want to make sure that, you know, we keep an eye on everybody, so it's fair.
If I can just address that briefly, we do have the South of Gandy study that is ongoing, and ADUs are going to be a topic of discussion as part of that. And additionally, with New Tampa, if there are neighborhoods that want this, we'd be happy to meet with them and talk about the implications. They just don't allow it already.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, as far as an immediate first step, we just didn't feel like that was worth going into yet.
Right. I yield back to Chair.
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And again, what I had mentioned, which is, and I think everybody's mentioned this, is maybe coming back and looking at this in the future, either for expansion, either to look at, again, unintended consequences. There's two distinct issues, as you indicated, with New Tampa. It's more of a contractual issue where you have separate government entities like CDDs, et cetera. It's funny, when I first heard of CDDs, I kept on calling it CCD. If if you're Catholic, you know what CCD is, which is funny, whatever. But there's CDDs and there's different types of issues like that preclude us legally from doing that. So it's really not a policy issue. It's more of a hands are tied issue. With South Tampa, it's a policy issue and whatnot. But again, I strongly support this. And wherever we can do it throughout the city of Tampa, I support this. I've always been a supporter of expanding our housing stock. I remember, gosh, maybe a year and a half ago, I think Abby was there with me, as I recall, talking in a part of my district about some apartments that were coming. They'd already been approved years ago by city council. They were coming, and people were really angry, and I was meeting with them. I remember one guy, I mean, just the stuff that people said, because the implications that people have due to their own fear and lack of connection with the real world on things like apartments is stunning. And this is political, but I remember in the 2020 election, some of the things that was said by one candidate who happened to be the President of the United States at the time about lower income housing sounded like they would have come out of the words of the mouth of George Wallace in his 1968 campaign, saying that we're going to save the suburbs from low income housing. And a lot of people fell for that, and that's shameful. So we all have to stand up for the idea that throughout all of our city of Tampa, that we have to have a city where the middle class can live, the working class can live, and folks who are struggling and working hard to make it to the middle class and the working class have a place at the table. And so I think we all support that 110%. So let's move this thing forward, get it done, because I think it's good policy. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yes,
Councilman Miranda.
I'm not going to support this. It talks about extended family, very difficult unless they get an ancestry certified copies of both of them and show you. Trust but verify. Also, the accessory dwelling, you may be able to understand that it's accessory dwelling. That doesn't mean that the most necessary ones are going to get it. The ones that pay the higher rent are the ones that are going to get it. There's nothing here about affordability. There's nothing here to help somebody out. It's just plain whoever gets it, gets it. So this really may not help anyone but whoever can afford to rent.
Councilman Hurtak.
I'm supporting this as is, but I agree with other council members that not only should we come back and look at adding other districts, but also to really, we really need to start grappling with the coastal high hazard area and what we want to see. So I would like to add that to the discussion of expanding where we allow these, but also really, really talking about what we want as a community in our coastal high hazard areas. So.
Anything else? South Tampa has accessory dwellings units already. If I'm not mistaken, in the corner of Palmyra and Himes, which is going even further south, there was a new construction that has an accessory dwelling there. Motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilwoman Hurtak.
Just for clarification, this is to move to advance the accessory dwelling unit.
Put the slide
This would be
back
to
up.
modify.
There's a certain number involved.
Could we get the presentation back up, please? This one.
One more.
This is
Just for the number.
27-132 is the code section.
I think you have to advance the slide one more.
It's
Under the specified
no, it
use.
would be the
27-132.
156.
156. 27-156. Sorry, the code section is not in the slide.
Repeat that one more time.
27-156.
27-156.
ADU allowable area?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Roll call vote, please.
Maniscalco?
Yeah.
Miranda?
No.
Hurtak?
Yes.
Carlson? Goods?
Yes?
Viera?
Yes.
Citro?
Yes.
Motion carried with Miranda, no. And Carlson absent.
All right.
Mr. Benson.
We have one more ADU-related change. If the presentation could come back up, please. This relates to off-street parking required. Right now, ADUs require one parking space on the site, regardless of the size. Extended family residences, which are 600 square feet and below, do not, and they're essentially the same type of use. So what we're proposing to do here, again, within the areas that we're expanding ADUs into, sort of subsuming extended family residences under that by saying that if the 600 square feet or below is an ADU, parking is waived. And this would apply to the same section that was just approved, all of those allowable areas. If it's 600 square feet or below, no parking is required. If it's greater than 600 square feet, then parking would be required. It would be one space per unit.
Councilman Maniscalco.
Thank you very much. Now, when you say one space per unit, if they decide to just park vehicles on their front yard as they do on Tampa Bay Boulevard and McDill, not throwing anybody under the bus, but they cannot do, they would have to have a paved, separate, finished parking space.
They would have to meet the code and technical requirements for parking to park on their site.
Thank you very much. So you won't have a front yard full of cars that would be in violation? Well,
yes, they would, yes.
Any other comments or questions? Is there any? Councilwoman Hurtak.
I'm just gonna go on record saying I don't think we should require parking, but I know I'm in the minority.
Move to approve?
Hang. Is there anyone in chambers that wishes to speak to this?
I guess this is the last one. Nathan Hagan. I just want to emphasize, I think we've all heard over and over and over again, we just reduced our parking minimums downtown. Orlando eliminated them, so by the way, someone can make a motion about eliminating them downtown anytime soon, but we're talking about ADUs here. The people who, one of the great things about accessory dwelling units are that today, and I say this all the time, if you can't afford a single family home, you're probably in crisis. There's nothing smaller than a single family home or a high-end luxury apartment downtown that is an option for anybody. We don't have a lot of housing stock that is good transitional housing. Accessory dwelling units fill that niche. I know there's a lot of fear that every single one of these is going to be an Airbnb, and some will. That every single one of these will be charged at above market rates, and some of them will. But many of them will be sold at a reasonable price per square feet on a 600 square foot unit is actually relatively affordable. So I just want to emphasize that parking costs money. Parking is not free. So if we're trying to create good transitional housing opportunities across the city, and we're saying that you have to now pay all this extra money or have this extra land for parking, you're preventing these homes from being built. You're actually saying, we want ADUs, but we don't want the ADUs for the people who can't afford parking. So I just want, I have a feeling where this is going on the vote, but I just want to be clear, there is a policy reality for requiring parking, that there will be fewer options, fewer ADUs that were created, and those ADUs that are not created are going to be the ones that would have been the most affordable, because there is a price gap between housing that has parking and that doesn't have parking. It's a real market phenomena, and people who don't have cars, because they can't afford them, should not be paying for parking. So, thank you.
Justin Willits again, just agreeing mostly with Nathan that we should not require parking either. We're trying to make affordable units, especially near transit. There's just no reason to include it. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone online? Ms. Pointer, are you online?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Pointer.
Okay, good afternoon again. Hopefully this is the last time. When we talk about parking, are we talking about like real cement or asphalt? Because in much of our city, it's okay to park on your grass. So if they're doing that, I'm not against it. So permeable parking should certainly be considered for all of this if that's going to even be a thought process. I would like to note that this is 4 items that you guys have discussed this afternoon since lunch, and it's taken you 3 hours to discuss those 4 items. And everybody who is participating in this at least has a clue what's going on. We were expected in our public information meeting to address 12 items, and I think it was about 2.5 hours long. I stayed for the whole thing, but I don't remember for sure. So just imagine doing that with 58 people or more. And then, of course, some of them have no clue what they're talking about. The guy who gets on and tries to sell his 3D housing and all this other stuff. So just remember how much we possibly got done during that time. So 12 items in any public information meeting is too many. But y'all have a great day. Thank you.
Ms. Bennett, are you there?
Hi, this is Caroline Bennett. I'm in favor of this. I urge you to go ahead and vote for it. When I made comments about the public information meeting, in no way whatsoever was my intention to denigrate staff or anything that they did. It's just that, as Stephanie just said, this is a very complex issue, and everybody's having a little trouble understanding all of the details. And if I have not made enough effort to understand them, I apologize, but I would like perhaps to have one more public information meeting between now and first reading that would just cover the ADUs. I can make an effort to educate just myself, but it's hard for other people too. And there were a lot of people on that meeting, and I think that a lot of people are in favor of it. They just want to know the details. That's the category that I'm in. And I also think that some people are in favor of it and they just want one or two little things tweaked that they have concerns about. So I would encourage that we have one more public information meeting between now and first reading. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by who seconded that? Lynn saying no. Excuse me, Councilman Hurtak is saying no. Seconded by Councilman Vieira. Any final discussions?
I'm just gonna vote no because I don't think we should have one space per unit, but.
Any other further discussions? To avoid it, let's have a roll call vote, please. Not the roll call vote, the voice vote.
Miranda?
Yes.
Hurtak?
No.
Carlson? Goods?
Yes.
Vera?
Yes.
Maniscalco?
Yes.
Citro?
Yes.
Motion carried with Hurtak voting no. Carlson absent.
Thank you. Ms. Feely, you're running up here.
Just want to finish real quick. I appreciate your indulgence. This is a huge step forward for us in planning for our city and for the opportunity to provide alternative housing solutions at a time when we are pressed at the seams to be finding those opportunities. I did just want to go over the schedule that we will go to the Planning Commission Monday based on your votes today on those items that you selected to move forward. We will be back in front of you the evening of December 1st to have first reading, including any changes that you prescribed today, the removal of certain items. On those items that did not get favorable, we will pull those from discussion at the Planning Commission for Monday as well.
Councilman Goods.
Ms. Feely, thank you for the presentation today. I know it was a lot of work. I'm not great on the ADU system right now. It has to grow on me because I don't see the attainability of them for a lot of folks. I see this as a way of capitalism because I did ask Ms. Hurtak what these things cost for somebody to rent. I'm hoping that with us going forward with this, that we would work with our housing department and our CRA people to talk about how we can have some programs if we do this so people can be attainable in some of these ADUs. So that's what I'm looking forward to see how we can tie those in to get folks in, and so not charging a little 500 square foot place $1,600. So you would make sure we kind of look at that as we're moving forward in some policies and things like that. That would be most outstanding. Thank you.
The other thing I did want to mention was depending on how this goes and when we get to second reading, I've talked with the team and we would like to probably have an effective date on this. Unlike your typical ordinances that go into effect as they are signed, we would have an effective date of this for like April 1st or something like that to give the code a chance to change and to get this lined up in a position that it would then go into effect. Unlike with West Tampa overlay, it changed that day, it went into effect, and then the building department, et cetera. So to make sure that all the wheels are headed in the right direction, we've got this going, we would do that in the ordinance as well.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought some of these were slated to come back November 17th.
There's one item in our presentation we asked to come back November 17th. It was the last slide. It was the change for the West Tampa alleys. We did not talk about that today, and given the time, I don't want to talk about it now. So if we could set that for November 17th, we would bring that back under staff reports, and Stephen would present that to you. And it is a very small change back dealing with the alleys.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councilman Maniscalco.
Real quick, I just wanted to say thank you to you and Mr. Benson and Mr. Cotton for all your hard work. I think I know how hard you work, but I really have no idea because this is a huge task and you always go above and beyond. So I want you to know that we appreciate you. This is a very lengthy discussion, but necessary and meaningful. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Council, we have 2 more agenda items to get to before our 5:01 meeting. I ask that we either be cautious of time or we take a break and go have something to eat and come back.
What about the posting the items right here?
And that's what I'm asking you, the council. If we can be brief, or we break for a supper before 5:01. That's what I'm asking council. Councilman Maniscalco.
I see Jonathan Moore in the audience, and he's nodding yes that we can be brief. I trust his nod, so I'm sure we'll be good because I don't have much to add.
Mr. Moore, if we take a little longer, we're holding it on you, and you have to take us to dinner. All right, agenda item number 16, file number CM 22-76987.
Good afternoon, City Council. Jean Duncan, Infrastructure Mobility. I believe those were motions 16 and 17. Thank you. We will be very brief, and we appreciate your time today. We want to address the 2 motions that were made. The first motion has to do with answering some questions that the public provided, and we emailed those responses a couple days ago. I do have paper copies if that wasn't something that you were able to see in your email box. The other item was to give you an update on the Hannah Avenue project, as well as the apprenticeship ordinance. So just very quickly, again, we want to try to start to get familiarity with our process. We're going to be following our grade 8 process, as our chief of staff mentioned. So that's embedded in everything we're going to be doing. We have our team here if you have any specific questions. We've got DPR, strategies, project support services, Aerial Group, and Envision Mijan, who is our owner's representative overlooking the EBO and the apprenticeship components of our project. We did have 2 videos to share, but in the interest of time, I can send you those links if you like. They're very good stories about successful experiences that some of our partners have had on the project. So I'll defer to the next part of the construction update. Very quickly, I'm sorry.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
Just a real quick question. Are those available to the public on your website?
We can put them on there. I don't know if that's been done, but we can certainly do that.
I think the public would like that.
I think our communications director tweeted them out or put them on social media, but I'll confirm. And we can also put them on our website.
That would be great. Then the public can find them. Thank you.
Yes. So very quickly on the construction part of the motion, we broke ground in January of this year on the Hannah Avenue Municipal Building. We've got 4 structures to build: the main building, the parking garage, the fleet building, and the facilities building. This is all part of our decentralization of our fleet and facilities, which everyone is excited about, of those departments that depend on those services. There's other work has to do with the site soil remediation, underground piping, stormwater construction, and utilities. Currently, the project is what we call 30% complete. with the envelope of the main building and parking garage completely up. So I'm sure if you've had a chance to drive by, you see some vertical structures there. This week, we have a roofing contractor who's mobilized and getting that started. Electrical on the parking garage is starting. We have deck pours in the main building underway. Those will take about 6 weeks. And the main building, we expect to begin the curtain wall installation of that in a couple weeks. Our final construction is anticipated for fall of next year. So we still have a lot of time to work on the apprenticeship and the EBO and other engagements with folks in the community and with trades to could possibly participate in this project. So again, the first motion about the questions, we did provide answers on those. And again, I can provide those on paper form if you like. The other part of the motion about the apprenticeship ordinance, I know DPR has been excited to partner with 4 apprenticeship programs. They're currently working with APG, and that firm is doing electrical, fire alarm, and data communications work. We have Ackerman Plumbing, GMF Steel, and DPR Concrete. And currently, all 4 companies are tracking to meet the 12% requirement per our ordinance. Just a reminder, this ordinance came along after this contract was issued. So we appreciate the cooperation of DPR to make good on that requirement, even though it was post-contract letting. And we've also appreciate Envision Mejon for coming along and adding to the eyes of Thomas Huggins, who is our EBO overseer for DPR. They're adding an extra set of eyes on these things to make sure everything is done per requirement, per goal, per ordinance. So I do have our folks here to answer any questions. A couple wonderful stories are O.T. Delancey from Strategies Project Support Services. O.T., if you could just wave your hand so they can see who you are. Thomas Huggins with the Aerial Group is here. Many of you know him. I was going to offer for them to speak if we had more time, but in the interest of time, I'll stop there and let any questions come along that we can try to answer for you.
Councilman Goods.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I didn't see, I thought it was the 11 questions that I submitted for your review, for your staff, Gene. And I got some of these questions I already had, but some questions I got from some other folks, not James Ransom, just so you'll know.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
So what I didn't see, what I was looking for, I didn't see the breakdown. I wanted to see the breakdown of, when I say minority, African American, female, Hispanic, I didn't see that breakdown. I'm looking for that breakdown.
Okay.
And then I'm looking for the breakdown, if I have a minority, I want to know the breakdown there, because I can have a minority, but who are they hiring as well? I want to know the breakdown of both. I think we need to have at least every couple of months a briefing on what we're doing, so people can say, I don't have to hear when I drive by. My mother lives 2 blocks away from the project. I don't have to hear people say, well, I don't see anybody over there working that look like us. I don't want to hear that. I want to be able to see what those breakdowns are, so I can say, well, these are the numbers they're showing me, so I can trust and verify what people are telling me of what I'm seeing. I do have a couple of questions as it relates to when we talk about the minority partners. A projected contract to actually be contracted. How does that work? Making sure that if you provide, or what would prevent a minority partner from going from a projected contract to an actual contracted person?
I think I might ask Brian Yarborough to answer that, so I can make sure I get you the specific answer. I have sort of a contract administration version of that answer, but I'll let him speak directly about this project on that.
Brian Yarborough, DPR Construction. Councilman Goods, in response to your question, we had our original estimate that formed that GMP agreement. And so when we talk about projected values for like Strategist or DuCon, it's based on that estimate. Now, as those teams have gone out to the market, solicited proposals, and pricing has come back from trade partners and they get a contract, there's some variance in that, right, from that original estimate. So that's where that's projected. As they finalizing their procurement and execution of contracts, we're getting closer to exacting that number.
All right. since you're the main guy, I think I did, with the, I know you have the CDC that's contracted with you, correct?
Yes, sir.
The partnership outlined in the MOU, will there be any service opportunity for the CDC of Tampa with a contract or compensation for those services?
Compensation to the CDC?
For those services? Do they have a main contract? People are asking, so I want to make sure we're clear. Their role with the organization. Are they contracted with you now, the CDC, to do any work or any type of minority partnership? Or?
So just earlier this week, our partners Ducon Construction held a workforce development event at CDC. I believe that was on Monday or Tuesday.
I was there. I went by there. And to the first question of that number breakdown, I want to view in the future. I want to also note if you're hiring folks to see what number of people are actually being hired from East Tampa. I think that's critical. The project's there. So what's your breakdown of here to your middle subcontract to your sub down here? I want to know how many are coming from East Tampa. I think that's good that we know how many people are applying, how many people are getting hired. I think that's critical to the project over there. I don't want to hear they didn't hire anybody. People lived on West Tampa, which to me, minority get hired, but I think for the crust of the people that's those communities over there, they want to know how many people got offered a job or actually got on a job site.
Yes, sir.
So hopefully we can provide those three things in the future. I think that'll be critical for me, especially in my district. I can say, well, we hired people from East Tampa. We have some names of people who actually worked. Mr. Master, you come up?
And we could certainly ask for that information. I do want to make it clear that they have no legal obligation to hire a certain number of residents from a specific geographic area in the city of Tampa. They have committed to certain goals in the contract for achieving both minority business and small local business enterprises. And those are the things that we've hired Envision to make sure that they do meet those goals, and they also meet the apprenticeship requirements in our code. So just want to make sure that you understand. You can certainly ask for more information, but legally, what they're required to do in order to meet the contract.
Mr. Earl's saying a closed mouth ain't never got fed. So I'm opening my mouth to get fed. I don't think that's too hard to ask. If I hire somebody, do you live in the area? I don't think that's a big deal. Or if I do hire, I have the contractor there to know how many minority businesses we have, and a breakdown of that sub who you hire, how many minorities you did hire as well. So I don't think should be a big issue contractually.
Well, and the other thing, that Gene Duncan reminded me, and we do need to be careful. There's some privacy safeguards too on what they can require from the folks that they hire and what they have to report out. So I just want to warn you, there may be some.
I get you. I ain't worried about that. I mean, I ain't got to know dang all that. I just need to know, did we hire somebody from East Tampa? We hired one. We hired five. I can say, well, we only had 5 people apply. Only 5 people got hired. At least we can know. I don't have to know their name, telephone number, address, but did we do it, or was there an effort to do it, Mr. Huggins? You follow me? Yes, sir. Because you know I'm going to get a spanking if I don't ask these questions or I don't get some people hired. Huh? All right. Other than that, I thought the report was good. You did answer my questions. And again, I'm just hoping that we get some regular updates on the project, not way down the line, but every couple of months come back, give me something so I can be able to tell people we're doing as these things are going up and being erected. That way I don't have the people in my ears saying I don't see nobody over there working.
Yes, sir.
Councilman, if I could add, we will be coming back in January per our chief of staff's offering to come on a semi-annual basis. We're kind of getting that started, so it's not exactly a 6-month separation, but we will be back in January, and we can certainly give you some of the information before then, but we'll have more of a comprehensive project update in January as well.
That'd be fine. Thank you, Gene.
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you, and I'll be very, very brief. I know we're pressed, just very brief. Number one, I know this is obvious. These are state certified apprenticeships, right?
Yes, sir.
I would assume so. And I didn't know, so Ms. Duncan, so I didn't know this. The apprenticeship ordinance went into effect. In other words, DPR could have had an argument that it didn't that it didn't, the apprenticeship ordinance didn't apply to this particular contract, but they voluntarily did it? Is that what you were saying?
That's my interpretation. Brian, you can say what you like about it, but they've been very cooperative, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I think when the apprenticeship ordinance passed, I believe it was March of 21, and the city put a list together of kind of contracts that were underway. This one pre-existed that ordinance, and so is a firm that has nearly 4,000 craft employees nationwide, women and men that are putting tool belts on every day. Workforce development's important to us, and so our conversations with the city were that we were committed to this, and you know, it's been a steep learning curve, certainly, the first project being subject to it, but I think we're trending very well with you know, several apprentices on site and some from East Tampa even. So you know, we're continuing to gather that data and learn as we go, but we feel like we're on the right track.
Well, we all appreciate that 100%. You know, what's great about that ordinance is that it takes the contracting process and has contractors who meet a certain threshold to invest in our young people in the creation of the future of our middle class in Tampa. So that's great, but we appreciate that 100% because I was unaware of that. I should have been, but I wasn't aware of that. Well, thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Goose, agenda item number 16, you were the maker of the motion. Are you satisfied with this report?
Yeah, I'm satisfied.
All council members, are you satisfied with this report? Agenda item number 17, Councilman Vieira, you were the maker of this motion. Are you satisfied with this report?
Yes, I am hereby satisfied.
Thank you very much. Council members, you are all satisfied as well?
Yes.
Thank you all very much. We are at recess until 5.
Thank you, council.
Thank you, Brian, appreciate it.
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Yes, if you can, the East Tampa overlay to return back, the East Tampa overlay to return back under staff reports on November 17.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Second. We have a motion made by Councilwoman Hurtak, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
This is one more relating to today. Hold on. All right, on September 15th, City Council received an email from the Chief of Staff requesting us to schedule 2 privately initiated text amendments on our October 27th City Council agenda. Unfortunately, we inadvertently failed to make that motion, so at this time I'd like to make a motion to schedule the 2 proposed PITAs on the November 17th, 2022 City Council meeting at 1:30 p.m. One applicant is East Tampa Community Redevelopment Area, and the second applicant is Tyler Hudson.
A motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're at recess till 5:01.
Thanks for the long vacation.